Sorry. Yeah, if people would mute themselves unless you're actually asking a question. Sorry, Dan.
So we work to assist companies in receiving SBIR dollars as well as venture capital. And we are involved with the process from start to finish. We've taken companies that with an idea, we try to take companies from idea to market and bring them with both SBIR dollars and venture capital. In preparing for today, we had planned on doing a piece on the SBA's grant process. And unfortunately, if you're here for that portion of it, we discovered in the research that unfortunately, while the SBA is doing a lot of funding, it's all in grants to agencies other than the 7J program for woman-owned hub zone and 8A certified companies. The rest of it is all to agencies to assist in providing technical assistance to companies. So we've decided to move to the SBIR process, and I'm going to be covering that today. And as for the accounting piece, we do have people on staff, which I'll go over later, to assist with grant accounting if you do have it for SBIR or other federal grants. So happy to work with you where we can. So first slide, please. So the SBIR program is carried on by a number of agencies: agriculture, commerce, defense, education. But the interesting piece is, as you take a look at this, all of these agencies do get this funding out to agencies. It is administered by the SBA and overseen by the SBA. But important to realize that it's not always funding from the agency that you would think that would be doing it. For example, the largest investor in life sciences annually of all of these agencies, more so than NIH and NSF combined, is DoD. So it's important to take a look at who these the entities are that are involved with the process, but also understand that just because it looks like the right agency, it may not necessarily be the right agency for you for the work that you're trying to accomplish. Next slide, please. So this is the most recent piece I've been able to come up with, and it's an important piece for you to understand who's got how much money out in this SBIR process. It gives a better sense of where the targets of opportunity are. While many may have funding, for example, the Department of Education may have $8.4 million. I've also seen that NSF has a great deal of funding in that area, and in fact probably has more annually in the education side than does Department of Ed. Next slide, please. So the basic requirements are that it's an R&D focus. It's not to commercialize existing technology, and it's not test and evaluation. So R&D and innovation are very important pieces. So the I and the R are really the most important part of the SBIR process. And remember that I and R stand for innovation and research, and it's important to note it's not iteration and research. If it's something that's already been done and you're putting a different color handle on something, rather than fully moving the mark on state of the art, then it's probably not going to be funded. The SB means that it's a small business, which means 500 employees or less for the most part, and it's a for-profit company. Must be owned and controlled by US citizens or a resident alien. This is going to be important. We're going to go over some draft regulations that are currently in play a little further on in this. The principal investigator must be employed at least 51% at the time of the award. It's important to know this. It's at the time of award, not at the time of application. A lot of people get nervous. They don't have someone who's employed who wants to be principal investigator at the time of application, but only at the time that you've been notified and you're about to sign the contract must the person be employed, and it must be a W-2 employee, not a 1099. At least 66% of phase one must be done by the company, and 50% must be accomplished by the company in phase 2. And it's important again to note that all work needs to be performed in the US unless there is a prior authorization from the agency. But I haven't seen a lot of those happen. Next slide, please. An SBIR awardee must be more than 50% owned and controlled by more than one individuals or multiple venture capital operating companies, hedge funds, or private equity. So basically it says, even if you're owned by multiple entities and your company is owned by venture capital firms, those venture capital firms must be in aggregate owned and controlled by US citizens. This is going to be something that they're focusing more and more on. So I put this back in here. It wasn't something I was putting in for a while, but it's back due to current state. SBIR awardee must not have a majority ownership controlled by a single venture capital operating fund or hedge fund. So you need to have 2 venture capital firms involved if you're going to go after SBIR, more than one. Next slide. Size determination. So again, it's affiliation for the purpose of the SBIR. They have rules that basically state that what is deemed an affiliation. They want to know who owns it and how much control there actually is between those companies. But again, it's something to look at for the SBA guidelines. I don't go too deep into this, but they're basically looking to make sure that no other entity that is large has control or ownership of the business based on affiliation. Next slide. So these are really important. What I've tried to do today is give you the minimum information that you would need in order to go apply for, or at least prepare to apply for an SBIR on your own. All of these registrations are important for you. The first is the Commonwealth of Mass Tax ID, unless you're not a Massachusetts company, but in which case you're going to have state of corporation registration. So that'll be important. So even if you're filed in Delaware, you're going to need to make certain that you are registered as a foreign entity to do business in Mass. You're going to need a UEID, which you can get at the SAM site, which is a unique entity identification. So it identifies your company, and they can identify you. It's like a DUNS number, and then you can register on the system for award management in order to. And it's important. You notice we've put free here. When you start the registration process and you get a UEID, you may start getting multiple people trying to tell you that they're going to charge you $50 to do it for you. It is a free service, so make sure that you recognize that and you are focused on that as we go through. Here's a very important piece. You must have an active SAM registration to submit. It does take as long as 6 weeks. I have had many clients over the years that didn't start their registrations in time, and on the day of award were fighting and battling to try and get their SAM registration completed, only to find out that there wasn't enough time and it did not get accomplished. And lastly, you're going to need to register at grants.gov. We do have a person on our team who specializes in these registrations, and we do provide the service to you at no charge. And all of our services are provided at no charge because we're funded by the SBA and the state of Massachusetts to assist. So we do have someone on site to assist you with these registrations should you have problems. So feel free to contact us and register. At the end of this, my contact info will be included. Next slide, please. So things to consider when you're going after your SBIR. First and foremost, the PI does not have to be a PhD. However, it's important to remember that many of the folks that are in here doing R&D do have PhDs, and it's the story of the 2 guys in the lion that go out hunting one day and have no luck, and they're sitting by the fire with their shoes off, and one of the guys sees as the sun's going down a lion running across the savannah at him. He takes off as fast as he can. He says, "Run, run! You got to outrun that lion." Guy stops to put his shoes on. He says, "No, I just need to outrun you." Mm-hmm. So if everybody else out there is wearing their PhD shoes and you are not, it is highly unlikely that you're going to get there. Have we gotten people funded without PhDs? Yes. but it's a lot harder. And I've seen many reviews that have stated things such as, this is only a newly minted PhD. Are we sure they've got the capability to do the work? Or in the case of a master's degree, are we sure that this person who only has a master's has the capability of doing this? So it really depends on it. And although the requirements don't say it, the reviewers don't necessarily always follow those rules. So you want to bring as strong a academic credential to the table for this funding as possible. But even if they don't have a PhD, they must, if they can demonstrate the expertise necessary to oversee the project scientifically and technically, it is possible to get the funding. Now, it's important to note that applications may be submitted to different agencies for similar work. So I do have a case where we funded a company doing cancer research. They got a phase 1, all for the same drug that's in clinical trials now. They got a phase 1 and a phase 2 SBIR from NIH to prove the efficacy of an existing cancer drug that was a systemic cancer drug as a topical cancer drug. Then we got a funding from the NSF for a drug delivery system, a topical drug delivery system. Then we got another funding from the NIH to combine a proven topical cancer treatment with a drug delivery system, so that we could then enter clinical trials with some more funding with a drug that was fully usable. So you can get funding for similar work, just not the same work. And this is the important part. Awards may not be accepted from different agencies for duplicative projects. A few years ago, there was a researcher at the University of South Florida that was arrested for getting funded by 2 different agencies for the exact same project and accepting the funding for both. And they have really started cracking down and taking a look at that. So it's important for you to note, and I put that in there so that you understand the difference between similar work and duplicative projects. Next slide, please. So this is the piece I was telling you about, the draft ownership, foreign ownership questions. These are currently under review and are open for comment. And these are things that they're really looking for because they've been worried about foreign governments benefiting from the SBIR program. So is the owner of the applicant or awardee party to any aligned foreign talent recruitment program? Is there a joint venture or subsidiary of the applicant that is receives funding in a foreign country? Are they wholly owned in a foreign country? Did they have technology licensing deals or intellectual property sales to a foreign country in the past 5 years? Or does the owner, and this is one of the things that they're really looking at, or covered individual have a foreign affiliation with a research institution? So all of those things are going to be important. So they're really trying to make sure that this funding is for companies owned and controlled in the US, so that the US government does benefit from the work. Got a question about expertise of non-PI. What is seen as demonstration of scientific and technical expertise? Okay. Can we go back to that slide for 1 second? So the answer really is something that we've all been told for years, and that is beauty's in the eye of the beholder. The rules and regs say that you're not really supposed to be looking at whether or not someone has a PhD and whether or not they are qualified to do whether or not they have the academic capability, but it's a matter of who the reviewers are. I've seen reviews where I knew there were questions as to whether or not the comments were fair or right, or even allowable under the rules of the SBIR program, but to protest them and have the time to go back at it is probably unlikely. So the same question that you ask is the question I would ask you. What is seen as the demonstration of scientific and technical expertise? Do you see that that demonstration is there? Do you feel that what you put on paper, not reality, because the only opportunity that you have to demonstrate the capability of this team is through this proposal process. So if you can show just to a degree that you feel it is as strong as you can do it, and it is as convincing as it can be, then I would say that that's great. But I can't answer what a particular reviewer might or might not deem scientifically or technically qualified. Over the years, I've seen a high number of proposals where 2 reviewers have said, "Oh God, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and the team is awesome," and the other guy said, "Not so much." So it really depends on who you have. So the answer to your question is, if you see it as demonstration of scientifically and technical expertise, technically capable, then that may be the best we could do. So you've just got to try to put your best foot forward. Next slide again, and then we'll ask if there's any questions on the foreign ownership. And then if no questions, then we can move to the next slide. So what do they look for? They are always looking for a clear articulation of the innovation. So you really need to understand, to demonstrate 2 things. One is what is being done here, and just as importantly, if not more so, how it is an expansion on state of the art. I have read multiple proposals over the years that have told me great things about the work to be done. And because I'm not industry specific, I may not know the specifics of one particular technology. I know a lot about a little. The answer becomes, what the articulation is you need to show and cite not only what is new, but why it is different, and cite state of the art in order to make certain that you do that. And we can go back and do foreign ownership, I guess, if we got another question, so we can hit that back one for a moment. Okay, so foreign ownership, can anything be built using consultants from outside, especially when you say outside, I'm assuming you mean outside the US. The answer is no. All funding must be spent within the US. Again, unless there is a prior approval. And the only time I've ever seen that is when we had a very specific DNA strain that needed to be used for a scientific project that was a patented strain of DNA that was only available outside the country. And that's the only time I've ever seen an approval put through. I guess we're good on foreign. Can we have a co-PI? Not outside the US. If they are inside the US and they are foreign, you would, from some agencies, you need a prior approval. But yes, you can have foreign, and I've had foreign PIs, but depending on the agency, you may need prior approval. If they have a green card or are a citizen, then no, but they cannot be located outside the US. I once had a team of US citizens who had had retired from their original careers and had opened a business together, put together a proposal. And while they were all US citizens, they were all retired to places far aflung that we would love to be sitting at a beach with them. But because they were all outside the US, it was rejected because we were spending the funds outside the US, despite the fact that they were US citizens. Anything else on foreign while we have once, twice? Okay, what reviewers look for. So we talked about the articulation of the innovation and how you have to show not only the innovation, but how it is different and expands upon state of the art. Identify risks and indicate the mitigation plan. It's very important. I get multiple reviews that come back that say, you missed that this was a risk and that there's a concern that the reviewers have about whatever the problem may be, and you failed to identify it, and you failed to, more importantly, identify a workaround should that problem come up. These folks are wanting you to be fully aware of the risks and be able to plan for them should something occur. And it's important to note, without risk, there can be no innovation. Therefore, they're going to be looking for risks. So I see a lot of times with my clients that have gone after venture capital already, that they spend a lot of time trying to de-risk their discussion when that's not what we're looking for here, because without risk, there can be no funding. But a lot of times people are so accustomed to speaking in a tone and a manner that is de-risking their technology that they fail to show that there's a risk, and therefore they limit the reviewer's vision of what is truly being innovated. There needs to be a detailed work plan and schedule. I like to see what I call the Duncan Hines method. Duncan Hines is a cake mix that tells you nice things like beat 2 eggs until uniformly yellow and preheat oven to 375 until, if using glass, 350 if using metal. That level of detail is going to be really important. And they want to schedule in a time frame. They want to know, what are you going to do with the money? How long is it going to take? And what are the steps that are going to be involved? A lot of times people fail to put that in, many times because they've failed to protect their IP and they're too nervous to be able to tell everyone about the technology. And I can read that a lot of times when I get a proposal. I'll be able to read it and see that there's just not enough detail in there for anyone to truly understand what's going to be done. And I'll ask the client, you haven't protected the IP properly, have you? And the answer is almost always no. What equipment and facilities will be used? This is probably the easiest section of the proposal that is often missed by clients, and they leave it to the last second. And it is often the difference between getting funded and not getting funded. So what the reviewers are looking for is what they call I like to call a balanced proposal. And it means that if say that you're going to need, for example, the world's largest atom smasher to do the work that you're doing, they're going to want to see in your equipment list that you own the world's largest atom smasher, or that you have funding available to utilize it, and you've scheduled a certain amount of time for that in your budget. So all of those need to be there. So they're looking to see that you're not trying to make the space shuttle out of toothpicks and gum, and they want to see what you've got, where it's located, and that you have access to it, and that you have all of the tools that you need to do the job. But most people leave that to the last second and often lose points as a result. Clearly state assumptions. Do not leave this to evaluators. This is really important. A lot of times I see proposals that explain 70% of it and expect everyone to be able to understand what the next steps are and why this is being said. And 9 times out of 10, when that happens, I don't understand what is being said. Don't let the evaluators assume that they know what's going on. Make sure you're very clear. Make sure that they truly understand what you're trying to tell them. Don't tell them half the details and expect them to be as smart as you are. Remember, next line, not all reviewers are PhD experts. Explain it to them so that they're not having to explain. Delve into detail if you have to. Focus on commercialization. If there is not a focus on commercialization, and if you're not showing that there is an opportunity to sell this product on the back end, there is going to be a concern that you're not going to commercialize it. Many researchers prior to your submission have gotten SBIR funding, done great reports, and then never commercialized a thing and gone back to a lab. So now it is really important to focus on your commercialization, so you're not lumped in and considered to be someone who's trying to just use this funding to continue their research. Again, show your differentiator or competitive advantage. A lot of times that's going to require citations. And if you miss citations, some people will be angered by that. I once had a client who ended up winning multiple awards and is very successful, who missed and failed to cite a research plan, which clearly one of the reviewers was involved with, that failed from 1972. And because we failed to cite that, they tore it apart. We had to go in for the next round, even though every other proposal we'd ever submitted together had gotten funded. But missing that one was very, very disconcerting for the one reviewer, and we didn't get funded as a result. As for your question, is risk only about tech or scientific, or is commercial risk can't find enough users? Well, therein lies a good question. You know, they want to see that there is commercial viability. They're going to be looking to see that there is a customer base. One of the things that we'll go over a little bit later is that, you know, if there is no commercial viability, again, this is the part commercialization focus from the start, then they're really not that interested. But yes, you know, it's okay to have some commercial risk as long as it's not something to the effect of that there is no end user and you can't identify the end user, because then there's not really a focus on commercialization. It becomes science for science's sake. So they're really looking for technical risk, not a lack of interest, and they will tear apart the proposals that do not show a commercial viability. Can commercialization be global? How do foreign implementers figure in this part? Yes, you can talk about this as a global commercialization opportunity. Focus on the U.S. Markets, but if it is a foreign market, it is open and allowable. I would say, however, although not part of the rules and regs, I have seen that there is a favor for those that have identified a domestic and foreign market, and those that have been solely foreign have tended to have a tougher time. Now, again, that's just anecdotal evidence, but you know, that seems to be with the many that I've submitted what I've seen. Okay, next slide. This is probably the greatest slide I've gotten. When I was on the National SBIR Conference Planning Board, I asked a DoD entity to put this together for me, and this is what their program managers told me. So the top 10 reasons for rejection. I did a full event on this one time called The Anatomy of a Bad Proposal. And we went through this in great detail, but the first is lack of detail in the plan. So I always like to talk about, there's an old cartoon where there's a guy up at the chalkboard and he's doing this very long, detailed mathematics problem. And then and then he writes down, and then a miracle happens and he comes out with a number like 32. So if there's not enough detail in the plan and they can't understand what it is and you can't show your miracle, they're never going to fund you. You know, they want to know what you're going to do with the money. They're going to want to know how you're going to do it. And I like to say, if at the end these guys can't steal your technology, it's highly likely that it won't be funded. Let's see, that not complying with proposal guidelines. Now, this is really interesting. It's gotten so bad over the years that people are trying to fit, you know, this into a 6-page thing, and they try. So there's a rule of how big the font size is, what the margins can be, and sure enough, the first thing they have is people that measure the font sizes and the margins, and they throw you out immediately if you didn't follow that rule and reg. This is federal contracting. This is federal grant law regulations. So if you don't comply, you know, I always have folks that think that there's got to be another way, or you know, this is close enough. It probably, if you think it's close enough, it's probably not. Again, no innovation. I talked about how you need to be able to demonstrate innovation, and not simply iteration, and be able to demonstrate how what state of the art is and how this is improving upon it. Too ambitious. A lot of times that means that you are trying to do too much with too little money, and they recognize that you do not have enough money in order to make this happen. And they are fairly certain that there's no way that you understand the work to be undertaken if you're trying to say that you can do all this work with this little money, or that you're trying to do this within a time frame that's impossible. Once you try to do too much with too little, they question whether or not you have the capability to do any of it. So make sure you have a realistic timeline and budget, because that is really what's going to be important in doing this work. Lack of prior work or state of the art, lack of knowledge of prior work or state of the art. Okay, again, that's the problem I talked about earlier with my client that didn't cite the failed research from 72. They want to know that you know what's been done, not only what's been done in the past. They want to know that you know what's going on currently for research, and they want to know, if it's possible, what's going on in other labs. Anything that you can do to cite that you know what's going on and what has happened, to show you can your technical improvements and to demonstrate your value proposition. That's going to be very important. Lack of credibility. Again, that's sort of a combination of all of the things that we've outlined. If you're not doing the guidelines, you're not putting in a good team, you don't have the right experience, you're missing a very large topic area or subject matter area specialists that would need to be in there. Those all will go towards your lack of credibility. Poorly written. God, I can't tell you how many times I read a proposal and I see misspellings and run-on sentences and just poor grammar on the first page. And once you lose a reviewer, it's impossible to get them back. And they're really going to need to see that you've taken the time. So even if you're down to the last minute, get somebody else to review it. If it's not us, somebody else to do it, because you want to make sure that when people are catching, when you're doing this, you've written this so many times, you don't notice your problems. Other people will. My favorite, missed deadline. Many of my researchers have spent their entire careers working to get just one more piece of data into the piece, and talking to their principal investigator or their professor for their PhD or their master's degree, and just getting 5 extra minutes or an hour extra. This is federal contract and federal grant law. If you miss the deadline, you can protest, you can ask for a congressional inquiry, you can do whatever you want. Late is late, and you cannot miss the deadline. Make sure that you prepare for the deadline. There's often times when this research, these projects need to be submitted, and it becomes a denial of service attack because so many people are trying to submit at the same time that it brings the server down. Don't be the last person, because that will mean that you may not get it in on time. So make sure you give yourself enough time, and make sure you don't try to just do that little extra to get it better when you've got to get it in. Not responsive to topic, another one of my favorites. So that's when someone has a technology that is tangentially related to the proposal and the request for proposals, and instead of meeting those proposal guidelines, they try to fit a square peg in a round hole and shave the corners, and it just doesn't work. It's not what they've asked for, it's not what they wanted. Therefore, there's not going to be funding. And This goes back to the question previously about whether or not there's it's important about risk in the business side, and the answer is if there's inadequate phase 2 or phase 3 potential, meaning there's nothing really further to do with the prototype, you just get the research for research's sake, or there's no commercialization possibility, then this isn't going to be funded. So how much tech detail at the level of patent do we need on preliminary results? Can phase 1 be to get preliminary results? The answer is that this is titled to be a feasibility study. So yes, however, many reviewers will come back to you when you write and say that they want initial data. They won't, some may not say that they want initial data. They may put it another way, but they are looking sometimes for initial data. I just had a review, just the other day that I went through that said, basically, this is really great. We think it'll do great things, but we're really not sure it will. So maybe come back to us with more initial data so we'll feel comfortable about funding it. Now, it didn't say it in those terms, but when I translated what the reviews said, that is what they were looking for. So the answer is you don't have to have initial data, but sometimes when you put it in without enough of it, the reviewers question it and may ask for it, even though that's not part of the requirement. Next slide. Okay, so where do I find more information? One of the things that I always like to do is find out where people have been funded in the past. So at this website, when you go to a closed topic search, you can do a keyword search on technologies related to that which you are trying to propose. When I work with my clients, I'll walk you through and building a strategy for how to use that data and what you would do with it. But it at least gives you an idea of where the funding's been coming from. And if you do some homework with the information you get there, you'll be able to contact the agency and maybe even the program officer who's been funding this year on year. Because I'm not really interested in what's open right now, because there may have been 30 proposals that closed a week ago for the work that I do, but there's nothing open during the period I'm looking. But if I look back, I'll find not only those 30, but I'll find 60 more that would be interested in my work, and I'd be able to identify sort of where the patterns are and maybe talk to those folks and see if they're interested. So I like to do research on where their funding has been coming from traditionally in order to make sure that we can go from there. Next slide. Okay, so what do we have available to you for SBIR? Again, this is provided to Massachusetts companies at no direct cost. We're paid by the SBA and the state of Massachusetts through the University of Massachusetts to assist. So we have people available to help you with business and entity formation, discuss the options, and guide you in the process, identifying where the SBIR opportunities exist, strategies for approaching SBIR funders. So we'd be able to teach you how to talk to the folks that are doing the funding, and strategies for starting submissions. We will do your review your proposals, and I apologize now about the bad things I'm going to say about your proposal. When I get to it, it's my job to tell you that your baby is ugly. I spend a lot of time reviewing. I did have 2 surveys ago, I had a client satisfaction rate of 96.9% good or excellent. The other 3.1% said I'm overly harsh and mean. So I apologize now about the bad things I'm going to say about your work. Identifying potential partners. So we may be able to talk with you about ideas of who would be good for you to bring in as a partner in order to strengthen the proposal. We have folks, we will take a look at if you are awarded. We have folks that can help you with your accounting work, and we will work with you to understand your reviews so that we can prepare to do a better job. Even if you were awarded, there will be shortcomings in it that we can work through to prepare for phase 2. And then again, interpreting reviewer comments and understanding them. So we look at the comments and again, talk about not only what was said, but what was meant by what was said. And then we'll walk you through that process, whether you win the proposal or lose the proposal, so that we can have a plan for either A, strengthening our position for phase 2, or B, submitting a better proposal, another phase 1 the next time. I do have a number of proposals, and it's very common that it's more than one submission in order to get funded. Next slide, please. So this is our program. It is no cost assistance, and it's available there. And I think is this the last slide? Yep. So let's just go back to that last slide so everybody has it. And this is how to get in contact if you would like to get in touch. Do not email me. Let's go to the last slide, please, Amy. I will, if you email me, I will be forced to tell you to go register. I'm going to need that registration for you in order to, from you in order to work with anybody for this. Okay. So I answered some questions as we went along. If anybody would like to ask some more, I'm happy.
Yeah, so feel free to take yourself off of mute and actually ask an in-person question. You don't have to type it in chat, but you've got your expert here. Might as well pick his brains for knowledge.
Thank you very much. I had plenty of questions answered on the chat during the review, so thank you so much, Dan. Do we have to meet any prerequisites in order for us to qualify for assistance? Do we have to have a registered company here in Mass, as an example?
You have to be located in Massachusetts, or be a Massachusetts company. You can't be a foreign, you can't be a satellite of much of a bigger company outside, but yeah, you got to be a Massachusetts company. And you can be registered in another state, but you got to be the Massachusetts located headquarters.
Got it. But you're not looking for an LLC or something in?
No, we have people that can guide you through the process of getting an LLC. So we actually have people to help you with that decision-making process.
Got it.
But I do not recommend ever going in as a sole proprietorship. I have gotten folks funded for SBIR with a sole proprietorship. Ultimately, we wound up having to transfer all the information, and they had no performance history with the government later on when they were doing the work, when they created a company. So it's always worthwhile to have the entity formed before going in, but not necessary.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Doreen Hing. I missed the beginning on who can apply. I'm a small business sole proprietor LLC, and obviously the inventor of my product. I don't have a PhD, and I saw something about 51%.
The principal investigator must be employed 51% of the time at the company as a W-2 employee at the time of award of the contract or grant.
Okay, so do I have to make myself an employee of my own company? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, you'll need to be paid by the company 51% of the time at the time of award, and you cannot hold a full-time job anyplace else.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's fine, that part. But if I don't have a PhD,
I've gotten people with master's degrees funded, but I will be honest with you, in all of the times I've done this, I've never gotten anyone funded with a bachelor's degree that was acting as principal investigator. I'm not saying it's not possible. I do know someone who was funded, but they had a team of about 40 PhDs under them.
so I would have to get some other people on my team.
Again,
I wouldn't be
I
the
can't answer
principal.
that. I can't answer the question. What I said earlier is the most important. It is, can we go back to the slide on that piece? Hold on, right there.
Mhm.
PI must demonstrate expertise necessary to oversee the project both scientifically and technically. And beauty is in the eye of the beholder. If your experience in industry can demonstrate clearly the ability, then anyone can be the principal investigator. But it's important to note it has to be clearly demonstrated, because just having the ability is irrelevant. If it doesn't appear that you have the ability, we may not be able to get funding.
Mhm. Okay. Oh, thank you.
So I guess you would really know the answer to the question, how does it appear? If it appears that there's a shortcoming to you, the reviewers are probably going to feel the same way. Is someone asking a question? I hear something. Maybe I don't know if that was a question or not. If someone is asking a question, can you type it? Because we're not getting your volume loud enough.
I think it might have just been some background noise. I'm not really sure, but
Okay.
any other questions? Feel free, come forward.
Sir, one more probably. So after we register on the site, could we come with an idea and you'd be able to tell us whether NIMH or NSF or both with slightly different approaches might work, that sort of thing? Would you do that kind of strategic guidance as well?
I would walk you through identifying it yourself, and you would make the decision.
Fair
So
enough.
I have definitely submitted multiple versions that were complementary to multiple agencies over the years.
Got it. Yes, as long as I don't violate this duplicative rule.
No, the guy from the University of South Florida is doing time for that. You don't want to do that. Although
Indeed.
it is 3 hots and a cot every day. So, there's something to be said for being taken care of.
Thank you.
You do have a question in chat, Dan.
Any difference between software and manufacturing innovations for funding? In the process, probably not, but obviously each of them is going to have their own consideration of what it is. We'd have to go through and find out, what you were trying to do, and specifically look at where that funding has been coming from. But I've certainly funded a number of AI plays over the years. Some health AI plays. I've done some software, some ed tech software, but it's a function of a very specific piece of funding and out of which agency that we'd be talking about that. So the answer is, I'm sure there is, but I couldn't tell you specifics here.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
I just got one here.
All right.
Me again.
Hold 1 second, Jerry Shapiro. I will talk to you after you register. That's going to take a great deal of effort, and I certainly don't have the time. But the answer is there are strategies for that, but we'd have to talk about what they were.
Thanks, Dan.
So the presentation will be available after this. I'm not going to retype all the links. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll
and
share the recording and the slides.
Go ahead. Someone else had a question?
Doreen.
Yeah, me again. So you can just, if you send an application in, it doesn't pass the reviewers, because isn't it just an ongoing rolling application? Or
Some agencies, yes. Some agencies you would have to change the specific aims or the goals and milestones in order to resubmit. Depends on the agency.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions?
Yes, I have a question. So I'm trying to start a company in license compound that is identified by scientific academic partner, but because of the university rules, he cannot be an employee of the company. So he can serve as scientific advisor. Well, I have experience in drug development. And if I submit, so am I qualified as a PI to when I submitted the grant application?
I would love to be able to answer that question, but there's so much more data I would need on that. What I can tell you is I deal with this regularly. And
Okay.
they don't have to simply be a scientific advisor. They can also do work. They just can't get paid. They can be an equity partner in the company, and they're getting paid by equity. They're not taking a check for their work. They don't have to necessarily only be an advisor. That's up to you. And that's keeping, that would be something that would be in consideration with their employment contract. I deal with university professors and spinouts on a regular basis. There are multiple ways to do it, and I'd need to get a lot more data in order to be able to answer your question fully.
Sure. Okay. So can I then say make appointment with you or someone?
Again, at the end of the presentation is a way to get registered.
Okay.
When you register at that website that's been up quite a bit so far, and I guess Amy will go to it now, then I can answer the question.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, I had a question, and I guess this is more just asking whether this is the kind of thing you could help with. First of all, thank you for all of this. This is super useful. Kind of academics coming from a research lab and trying to use, say, the SBIR to fund the companies straight out of the gate. Kind of advice, or would you be able to give advice as to how to meet this 50% employment contract requirement, given that initially there's perhaps not very much money or none at all?
Well, again, it's got to be 50% employment at the time of award. So, you don't have to pay them until there's money in the budget from the SBIR to pay the people.
Got it. That's useful. That's useful clarification. Thank you.
But yes, we can certainly work with you on strategies for how you would form your team. I do that quite a bit. The question on SBA grants, unfortunately, there's only one SBA grant that's out there, and I went over that early on. SBIR is one of the two, and it's not actually directly from the SBA. It is overseen by the SBA. But that's about it. But does having a concept product without a startup or existing company affect odds on funding? Will filing for LLC be enough to be considered? Absolutely. The answer is, as I said earlier, I have gotten people sole proprietorships funded in the past. Not having an entity is not a requirement. It's just wise for the long term, and I could go over all of the reasons at another point. Be it, it's easier to get a track record with the government that way, so the likelihood of add-on funding is greater, as well as having an entity that is existent is easier than not having one, because you don't have to pay the cost later on if there's some venture capital in play that might want to go in, because they're not going to give sole proprietorships or an LLC venture capital. So there's a number of reasons, but I'd have to go through all of the details on another day.
Is having a product in early user alpha testing considered too advanced to qualify for any SBIR work?
Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And again, sometimes it depends, it may well be considered initial data by one reviewer. It may be considered too far down the road by another. So without true detail, I can't answer it. And even with true detail, I may not be able to, because if we catch 3 reviewers that are counter to what I think, we'll find that out the hard way. But the answer is probably it's still possible. I mean, I've certainly gotten things that were that one company considered an alpha prototype to be classified and considered to be initial data, and quite frankly, it may well have it truly was initial data. I think sometimes startups are a little more positive and optimistic about what they have rather than what they really do have. So the answer is it's probably fundable if it hasn't gotten too far down the road, but I'd have to get detail. Anyone else? Anyone else?
I know Jerry had a question. Jerry, do you want to ask that question of Dan? Or would you rather do it?
I already did.
You already
Already.
did. Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, and that's truly answerable, but we're going to have to get into detail with it.
I have a question. Another question. So yes, actually, I started to do the registration and see that the meeting has different options: in-person, online, phone call, and video conferencing. So, what is your preferred? What is the preferred meeting option for your team, for you and your team?
Well, I typically do everything by telephone. I've been doing it that way since long before the pandemic started, but we'll figure it out. Just put it in and I'll figure out what's quickest to get to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
And to answer what the best way to search for a grant opportunity, that's covered a little earlier. The website's in there.
And again, I'll share these slides with people so you have all the URLs.
One other question, and perhaps I missed this, for those who are kind of in a academic context and are seriously thinking about doing this. So to be frank, I submitted an NSF, I think it's called pitch, and that was favorably reviewed. What are ways to shorten and what's an average timeline for actually completing an SBIR as kind of a solo person driving this?
Wow. That's going to definitely be a one-on-one. There's no good answer for that. There's a million things that can speed it up and a million things that can slow it down. But to answer your question, I would need to really take a look at details on that one.
That's fine. Great. Thank you.
I wish I were that good. Okay. Anyone else going once? Twice? All right, well then I will thank everyone for coming. Amy,
And
thank
thank
you.
you, Dan, so much. Really great knowledge. I did record this. I will be sharing the slides. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And it was a great session.
Thanks so much. I'll look forward to hearing from those of you who are interested in the assistance.
Great.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.